Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Baba Basra, daf Chav Zayin. We are Masechta Baba Basra, daf Chav Zayin. We're going to begin from daf Chavav Amid Beis. Let me make it very big. About Chavav Amid Beis, about I would say 8 lines from the bottom, 8 or 9 lines from the bottom. Ama Ula. Ula said. So let's get the pictures up. Okay. Ula is discussing over here. Let's get the picture right over here. You have a tree. You have a tree that's planted in the middle, right? So a tree, in order for it to be mechayev in bikurim, let's call it a pomegranate tree, right? In order for you to be obligated in bikurim, the nourishment of the tree has to come from your property, because the Torah says, "Reishis pri admoscha tavi beis Hashem lekecha." It has to be fruit that nourishes it from your ground. A tree, if you plant a solitary tree, 16 amas in each direction, it nourishes from the ground. Okay? So Ula is going to say a fascinating thing. First of all, that if you plant a tree within 16 amas to your friend's property, so what's giving nourishment to the tree? Your friend's property. Therefore, you're not obligated and you don't bring bikurim. That's what Ula is going to say. Not only that, if your friend didn't give you permission to do that, then you're going to be considered to be a ganav. Now let's read the Gemara. Ama Ula, okay, you see it? On Chavav and Bebeis. Ama Ula. Ula said, Ilan hasamach lemetzar, a tree. You plant a tree on your property that's very close to the border of your friend's property. Besoich sheish esrei amma. It's within 16 amas of his property, so very close to where he is. So if you didn't tell him that you're doing that, gazlan hu, you are stealing from him. Okay? Hi, Alan. We just began. Chavav and Beis. Very simple. Ula made a comment. If you plant a tree in your property within 16 amas of your friend's property, so it's getting its nourishment from Steve, we just began. It's getting its nourishment, a tree that you planted very close to the border of your friend's property, within 16 amas of your friend's property, and you didn't tell your friend you're planting a tree right at the border. So gazlan hu, you're stealing from your friend because the nourishment of the tree is coming from your friend's property. Ve'ein meviin mimenu bikurim, and if it's, let's say, a pomegranate tree, so you don't bring bikurim from it, because the Torah says asher tavi mi'artzecha. You bring the bikurim as long as it comes from your field, not if it comes from somebody else's field. And since its nourishment of this tree is getting its nourishment from your friend's field, you don't bring bikurim. So therefore, basically, Ula is saying a scientific fact that the nourishment of a tree, of a fruit tree, is nourished all on the property, on the ground, 16 amas in all directions. Okay, as you can see in the picture over here, 16 amas in all directions. So the Gemara says, how did Ula know this scientific fact? I mean, obviously, maybe he studied botany, but Ula had to find a source in the Mishnayos. So, Ilema, would you say like this? Miditnan, we learned in Masechta Shvius about Shemitah. We're always familiar and with Shemitah that you're not allowed to plant and you're not allowed to plow on Shemitah year, the 7th year. But did you know that already in the 6th year, you have to stop working your field? And in fact, a wheat field, you have to stop plowing the field already in Pesach time. And if it's a field that grows trees, then you have to stop working that field already Shavuos time. Okay? But there is a halacha l'maisha mesina that gives you an exception, that if you planted saplings, young trees, you know how you plant young trees, and you planted esenetias, 10 young trees, hamufuzores besoich beisa, that spread out throughout a beisa, which we'll see what that is, a certain area. So then, there's an exception. Whereas regular trees, you're not allowed to plow around the regular trees until Shavuos, but beyond Shavuos, you're not allowed to work that field anymore. But here, Choshen Kol Beisa'ah B'Shvilon Ad Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to plow the entire field because it's a young sapling. It's Halach L'Moshe Messinai that you're allowed to plow around the field up until Rosh Hashanah. So here's the picture. You have S and Atias spread out. Now, over a base saw is 50 amas by 50 amas. Okay, so that you know. So now you're going to have 50 times 50 is 2,500 square amas. Now, what the Gemara is going to say is how much each, so you're allowed to plow this entire field. How much does one tree field benefit from the ground around it? 250 amas. Okay, 250 amas. Now, that's what you're going to find out from this picture. So, kama hava luhu. What is the size of a base sa'a, says the Gemara? Trey alfin, it's 2,000, v'chamesh mea garmidi, 2,500 square amas. L'chol chad v'chad, for every sapling, every tree, how much are they benefiting? So, well, it's 2,500 divided by 10. Kama matale, masan v'chamshin, that's 250. So this Mishnah seems to say that a tree nourishes 250 square amas. In 250 square amas. So says the Gemara, ha loy hava de ula. That doesn't equal ula, because what ula is basically saying, if you look at what ula is saying, as you can see in the picture, is that a tree needs 32 amas in each direction, 16 amas. So 32, they should have put a 32, and 32, right? Because that's Ula's per tree. According to Ula, a tree needs 1,024 amas, square amas, whereas that Mishnah says a tree needs only 250 amas. So Ula is much, much more than what that Mishnah says. So that is not a source of where Ula got his idea. In fact, Ula is so much more that maybe a young tree needs much less ground, and Ula is referring to an old tree. So the Gemara says, Ve'ela miditnan. Again, what we're trying to find over here is where did Ula come up with this idea that every tree needs 16 amas, every tree needs 1,024 amas. So the Gemara says, we learned in the Mishnah, Shloisha inona shel gibel b'nei Adam, harei elam mitzdarfin, v'chorshin beis, we go to Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, v'chorshin beisah b'shvilam. What he said was that there's three adult trees, okay? So now, really, then you're allowed to plow this field up until Shavuos time. Remember, only young saplings we allow you to do to Rosh Hashanah, but old trees you have until Shavuos time. And if you have three trees in a beisah, like you see in the picture, so then you can plow this entire area up until Shavuos time. So how much is this area? 50 by 50 is 2,500. You split it between three trees. Each tree gets 833 and a third square amas. Ula said every tree needs 1,024. So that cannot be the source of where Ula got his idea. Okay? So that's what the Gemara is going to say. Again, what we're trying to find out, where did Ula come up with this idea that every tree needs 1,024 square amas to survive, that will, of ground to be called its own. So again, but I want to point out to you what if you only had two trees, by the way, in this area, then you're not allowed to plow the whole area. You're only allowed to be plowed right underneath the tree with a basket and just a little bit around it, but not extensively in the entire area. Anyway, but once there's three trees, kama havale. Again, how much is an area of three trees of a beisah? Trey alpha v'hei mea gamidi, 2,500 square amas. L'chol chad, each tree divided by three, kama matile, You have 833 and a third. Akatan afishalei de ula. So ula is much more. Ula is saying, basically, ula is saying that basically ula is very is saying a big kula that as long as the property is not yours, if as long as the property is not yours, as long as the property is not yours, you don't have to bring Bikurim. And that extends 16 amas in each direction. Ul is basically saying that as long as this is not yours 100% right over here, then you don't have to bring Bikurim. And this brisa seems to say if even if it's smaller, if a smaller area, you need it to be yours. So and beyond that, even if it's not yours, you would still bring bikurim. So the brisa seems to imply that the nourishment of a tree is much smaller than the amount that Ula gave. And says the Gemara, loidak, Ula was not precise. Says the Gemara, ema damrin and loidak. When do we say that a person is not precise? When do you say a tana is not precise? L'chumra, if he's being strict. L'chula loidak mi amrinim. Would you say that to go light? Would you say that he's not precise? Ula is basically saying that as long as in 16 amas in each direction, you don't own the property, you don't have to bring Bikurim. But according to the Brisa, according to the Mishnah size, it would be smaller than that, because beyond that, you are obligated to bring Bikurim. So the Gemara says a fascinating thing. Really, Ula mi savret biribu ka'amrinim, bi'igula ka'amrinim. Okay, let's see the answer in pictures. Basically, we can see it in this one, Daf Chav Zayin. Here, by the way, here's the picture that you can see of Ula. 16 amas in each direction. It's a much clearer picture. You plant the tree. You have to own this property all around in order for you, this pomegranate tree, to be obligated in Bikurim. Because if you don't own this land, then you can't bring Bikurim. Comes along the next page, and he says like this, that we're up to the teretz of the Gemara. Really, Ula said 16 amas, but Ula was talking about if you place a circle around the center of the tree. So it's not totally 16 amas if you go diagonal. So basically, you only get a square that surrounds a circle. The circle is 75% of the square. So if you think of it that way, so then if you think of it that way, then you take 75% of the circle. I'll see, but the total circle of Ula was 1,000. What did Ula say? 1,024. You times that by 75%, and you'll get 768. That's what Ula is really saying, 768 square amas, and the Mishnah is saying 833 amas. So actually, the Mishnah is larger than Ula, because Ula wasn't referring to a square; he was referring to a circle. Okay, and therefore Ula was saying 768 amas squared, and the Mishnah is saying 833 amas squared. So Ula has a more chumra digashita, because whereas the Mishnah will say up until 833 amas you don't have to bring bikurim, and Ula is going to say up until 768 amas you don't have to bring bikurim. So the Gemara is going to say that fits in, because Ula is more stricter, and he was not precise because he wanted to go more stricter, and you don't have to be that precise. So the Gemara says like this: Bi'igula kamrin michte kamrabu yoisal igel revia pashalu zayamei of tishusmani. So Ula is really 768. Akati pashli palga da amsa, they have 65, a half amma more. Hainu loidak l'chumra loidak. So up until this point, if you got it, fine. If you didn't, it's also good, because you get the basic point. The basic point is, Ula says that in order for you to be chayav b'bikurim, you need to own the property totally around the tree from where the tree is taking nourishment. So kashma, and according to Ula, it would have to be like 16 amas, or at least somewhere near 16 amas. So tashma, come in here, and here comes the basic questions against Ula. Tashma, come in here. Hakoini ilam, someone buys a tree, bikarkoi, and it's ground. So let's say you bought one tree, one pomegranate tree, and the ground underneath it. Maybe v'kaire. You bring and you can bring and read the Parshias of Bikurim. Wait a second, you just told me that according to Ula, you need to own 16 amas all around that tree. My love, doesn't the brisa mean kolshu? All if you bought if that no matter what size the land is underneath the tree, that's enough. Answers the Gemara, no, the brisa means that you bought a tree and you bought 16 amas around the tree. But just holding, just a tree and what's underneath it, that wouldn't be enough to obligate you in Bikurim. Tashma, come in here. If you bought 2 trees in your friend's property, maybe you would bring and not read because you didn't buy the land. You just own the trees, so you would bring the Bikurim and not read. Ha shloisha. But if you bought 3 trees, even though each tree you only bought the land underneath it, maybe v'kaire, you would bring and you would read it. My love, kolshu. Wouldn't you think that it means that you only bought a little property underneath the tree, and according to Ula, you still need to own 16 amas all around the tree? And so the Gemara, that Bryce is also talking about that you need to own the tree. Of course, you need to own the tree, but you also need to own 16 amas all around the tree. Because if you don't, then that's not your land, and therefore you're not obligated in Bikurim. Tashema, come in here. Rabbi Kiva says, Karka Kolshuhu, here it is. Rabbi Kiva says, if you bought a piece of land, a little piece of land, Chayev bepeya, you're obligated to give peya, ubi Bikurim. And if the tree is growing on that little piece of land, you're obligated in Bikurim. The koisinola prusbel, and you write a prusbel on it, which we're not going to go into. But here, Rabbi Kiva says clearly, straight up, that if you own a tree and just a little bit of property underneath the tree, you're obligated in Bikurim. So Rabbi Kiva, how could Ula argue in Rabbi Akiva? Plus, we go to Chav Zayin Amabez. If you own that property, that karka kolshuhu, let's say you have a Swiss watch on top of that little piece of land. So we know in order to acquire the Swiss watch, you have to make like a hagbo, you have to lift it up, or mashicha, whatever it is. You have to in order, that's called a kinyan. But we know that if you buy the property, and show ownership on the property, you automatically own the watch that's on the property. So even if you have a little piece of land, and that would be enough, as if you made an acquisition on the property, you can get all the movable items on top of that property. Anyway, the bottom line is, Rabbi Akiva says, a karka kolshuhu is chayiv b'bikurim. And so the Gemara, what is Rabbi Akiva talking about? Not a tree growing out of that ground. Bechite, wheat. Daikinami, the Ketani, I'll prove it to you, because the Ketani kolshuhu, Rabbi Akiva said, even if it was just, an inch, that's chayiv b'bikurim. Well, trees don't grow in an inch. So, Shema Mina, Rabbi Akiva wasn't talking about a tree. A real tree needs 16 amas in each direction. A piece of wheat, which is one of the Zion minim that you bring bikurim, right? Any of the Zion minim, one of them of the 7 species is a piece of wheat. That piece of wheat, Ula will grant you that all you need is to own the property underneath the piece of wheat. But if you own a tree, a pomegranate tree, in order for you to be obligated in Bikurim, Ula maintains his position that you have to own 16 amas around that tree. Tashma, come in here. Elon, Miktasi ba'aretz, Miktasi b'chutz la'aretz, Talva v'chulim muravan zebezeh, divrei Rabbi, B'shemim megamliel oima, agol b'chiyev, b'chayev, agol b'ptur, p'tur. Let's go to the pictures. Here, you have a picture. Imagine, let me get the picture up. You have a tree that's growing. Half of the tree, here's the picture. Half the tree is in Israel. Half of the tree is in Chutz La'aretz. So the ones that's in Israel is Chayev and Trumas and Maasros. The ones that the part of the tree that's growing out, not in Israel, is it's one tree is Pata from Trumas and Maasros. Okay, as you can see in the picture. However, that's what Hagadol B'Chiyav. That's what Rebbe says. That's what that's what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says. So it's tevel, and the part that's in Chutz La'aretz is chulin. But according to Rebbe, it's all mixed up. Even the part that's growing into Chutz La'aretz is considered to be like it's part of Eretz Yisrael, and the part that's growing in Eretz Yisrael is considered to be part of Chutz La'aretz. So even no matter where you're going to pick the tree, it's chayiv and trumas amaisers misafik. Okay, that's the Gemara. That's what the Gemara says. So now so the Gemara has a diak. Ad kan loy pligi. Okay, there's no argument between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Rebbe by these trees. Ela demar sava yesh breira. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds you can clearly demarcate what is belonging to Chutz La'aretz and what part of the tree belongs in Israel. So you can clarify it. Umar Sava, Rebbe says you can't clarify it. Ein breira, you can't clarify it. Aval Godol Biptur, if the entire tree was in Chutz La'aretz, let's say the entire tree was in Chutz La'aretz, but on the border of Israel, Divri Hakol Poter, it would be not obligated. Wait a second. According to Ula, let's say in this case that it's totally in Chutz La'aretz. You see this tree? It's totally in Chutz La'aretz, but its nourishment, the roots, grow in Eretz Yisrael. Everybody would agree that this would be potter from Trumas or Meisers. But if it's within 16 amas, according to Ula, it should be chayiv in Trumas or Meisers because the tree, according to Ula, gets its nourishment from ground in 16 amas in each direction. So that's the Gemara's question. And Abagoda Batur, Divi Hakal Patar. Answers the Gemara, Hachabamayaskeen, and you're right. If in that case, it would be chayiv in Trumas or Meisers, but the mafsik sinuma. Sunma, it's talking about there's like a rock that blocks the nourishment of the tree when it gets to Chutz La'aretz, when the tree from Chutz La'aretz gets to Eretz Yisrael, or the tree that's half in Eretz Yisrael, half in Chutz La'aretz, there's like a rock that blocks nourishment from either side of the tree. So if it blocks nourishment from either side of the tree, so let's try to understand why does Rebbe hold that the part that grows in Chutz La'aretz, we treat it as if it grew in Eretz Yisrael? Wait a second, there's a rock underneath here that blocks the nourishment. Ihachi, my time of the Rebbe, that's the question. Answers the Gemara, the Hadre Arvi, they get mixed up again. Why? What's the argument between Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Mar Sava Aviru Mabalbal. Rebbe holds that true, they're divided underneath the ground, but when you get to the tree trunk, they're already connected again. And therefore, the fruits are considered a mixture of Chutz La'aretz fruits and Eretz Yisrael digga fruits. Umar Rav Shimon Gamliel holds Hai L'chudei Koi v'Hai L'chudei Koi. That means that there are 16 amas. Once there's a rock that divides it in the bottom, like you can see in the picture, then it divides it all the way up. And therefore, anything growing in the Chutz La'aretz side is Chutz La'aretz fruit. Anything growing in Eretz Yisrael side is the Eretz Yisrael fruits. Okay, now. The Gemara just asks one final question, then we're going to go to the next Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Is 16 amas enough for a tree? Well, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, a tree should be separated from the pit 25 amas. When you plant a tree and your neighbor has a pit nearby in his property, you should put your tree 25 amas away from that pit, because the roots are going to go and damage his pit. So we see that roots seem to go even more than 16 amas. So Abaye explained, it's simple. Mazel tu v'azle. Of course, roots can grow very far. It doesn't take nourishment from the ground, from the soil, only in the first 16 amas. Beyond 16 amas, it's not taking any nourishment. Therefore, as a root, as a piece of wood, it could damage the bar up to 25 amas, even more. But nourishment to keep the tree alive, it's only the first 16 amas away from the tree in either direction. That's where it draws its nourishment. He also Rav Dimi Amar. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. He said, Shlakish asked this question from Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Dimi learned in Israel, and he learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yochanan, and he saw Shlakish asked this question. What's the din? The same idea that Ula said, that if you plant a tree close up to the border of your friend within 16 amas, Rabbi Yochanan said you're a crook, and you don't bring Bakurim from that tree. But Ki Asa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Ravin said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, not so fast. Even a tree that, that's that you planted it right up into the border of your friend's property, so it's nourishing from the friend's property, or if the tree is so big that the branches go over your friend's property, maybe Vikari, Utaka would be Bikurim. Why? Yeshua gave the Jewish people the Eretz Yisrael, and he made a condition with them that if your friend encroaches on your property, don't be so particular about it, and therefore let him have it, and gift it to him, so that he could bring Bikurim on his own. So that ends that sugya. One more piece, and we'll stop. Another minute and a half. Elin shu noitus deichavere koitzes malay mardea al gabe mechreisha v'charvishit meknegam shayet mishkoilis. Beis hashlochen kol ilin kenegam mishkoilis abashol oime kol ilin sra kenegam mishkoilis. Let's just see the picture. The picture goes like this. Let's just see the picture over here. A guy has a I like the pictures that he has over here. The picture is that, let's say you're plowing your field and your friend's property has a tree that's getting in your way of your plowing. So you're allowed to cut off his branches of his tree that encroaches on your property, which will allow you to lift the mardea, the stick, to hit the animal as it's plowing your field. Because if you're going to have the branches over there, you're not going to be able to lift your stick. It's going to prevent you from plowing. So that's one thing. And if the Mishnah continues, if you have a sycamore tree, which has a lot of shades and it's damaging to your crops, so then you're allowed to place a plumb line, right? Imaginary plumb line on your property and cut all this part of this tree that encroaches on your property. That's what the Mishnah says. And if a beis hashlochen, the Mishnah says, if it's an irrigated field, then you're allowed to cut the entire field opposite the plumb line, okay? Beis hashlochen, which, let's say you have an irrigated field, so very much shade is damaging to such a field. So yeah, if you own an irrigated field where it needs a lot of water, so then any shade is very damaging to your crops. So then you have a right to cut off all those branches that encroach on this field, not just a little bit, let's say, but up to a certain height, but you can go all the way to the top so that the sun hits your crops. And then there's a mystery Abba Shaul Aimer. We're not going to do it now. We'll maybe do it tomorrow. Abba Shaul says, Abba Shaul Aimer, kol ilan surah, any non-fruit-bearing tree, keneged amishkoilis, you're allowed to cut it off like this, opposite the plumb line. So if he has a not bearing fruit tree, you're allowed to just cut it straight down. This is what Abba Shaul says. We'll discuss about it maybe tomorrow. Be'ez Hashem. Okay, not an easy daf, but we did it with the pictures.
Thank you for the pictures.